Welcome back from the break, guys, and thank you so much for keeping it the parenting show. We are on an amazing segment now. It's time for baby hacks, and I mean we all need these hacks to make sure journey yetu ya parenting inafanywa ikuwe rahisi. So it's time for baby hacks. That has been baby hacks. I'm sure we've been able to learn one or two things, and I can also attest parenting doesn't come with any manual, and we all need these hacks to make sure journey yetu ya parenting inafanywa ikuwe rahisi and the most enjoyable way possible. Up next is parenting one-on-one with me. Hi beautiful people, welcome to the parenting show. My name is Mombasa, and we are on an interesting segment. The segment is called Parenting One-on-One. And with me, I have a guest. I'd want him to introduce himself and tell us more on what he does. And I'm looking forward to a great conversation with you. And I'm sure even you at home, whoever is watching, you'll be able to learn one or two things. So welcome to the show. Follow me on my social media handles at Chepchumba Cherus on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at Marlin Cherus. The hashtag to use during the show is the parenting show. And you can also follow our station pages at KTN Home on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. Welcome to Parenting One-on-One, and let's kick it off. So welcome, Mahmoud. Kindly introduce yourself and tell us more about what you do.
Thank you, Cheptumba. Like you said, my name is Mahmood Merali. I've been a psychologist at the Aga Khan University for almost a couple of decades now. Presently, I'm the head of department for both counseling and clinical psychology at AKUH in Nairobi. Although we don't restrict ourselves to AKUH Nairobi, it's more or less AKUH Sub-Saharan Africa today. As a department, we have additional sub-specialized training in different areas, in the various areas of counseling, mental health, child counseling, child assessments, and adult assessments. So I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm a psychologist, and there is a huge difference between the two, which we can share as we go along.
Yeah, okay. And my first question would be, who's a child psychologist or a psychiatrist? Yeah.
Good. So there's a very, very big and very clear difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor, somebody who's done medicine and then has specialized in mental health. And if it's a child psychiatrist, then they have specialized in mental health of children and adolescents. Children would be below 14 or so,
okay.
And adolescents would be, say, 14 to about 18 or so. And the psychiatrists would, in their training, would have included both psychiatric and emotional problems. And then they can guide, when they assess the child, they can guide on what is the best treatment for the child. And it could be therapy for a child by a child psychologist. And if need be for medication, then that's where they come in a lot more, because the psychiatrist will have the training to know what kind of medication is appropriate for the child. Usually psychiatrists will also have some additional training in counseling skills, communication skills, that sort of thing. So the psychologist is different. The psychologist is not a doctor of medicine. They are a doctor of psychology. And then they have specialized in child and adolescent issues, and some of which I'll be able to highlight as we go along.
I hear you. And actually, I think my next question would be, there's a difference between a child psychologist and a child psychiatrist. And I think you've mentioned some of them, some of the differences, what they do, what they both do. Do you want us to expound on it, kidogo, just to make sure everyone gets whatever we are just about to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So the differences are clear. Child psychologist is not a medical doctor. They are, but generally they work very much hand in hand with the psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And children that we see usually will have common problems that are age dependent. So children will have issues that are situational, especially small children. Very often you will see that they have issues that affect them more on what is happening in their life at that time, whether it is at home, whether it is at school. And so that is more age dependent. And so generally children below 10 or so would have issues that are more relating to, say, home or school, whether there are conflicts at home, there are arguments at school, parenting issues, any kind of trauma. So as I said, more what is going on within their home, within their life at that time, and within school. For adolescents, we generally tend to look at them as children, but they are more or less grown-up children to some extent. And they will have different issues, more related to growing up, teenagehood, into adulthood. So very often we will see adolescents going through identity issues, peer influence issues, internal conflicts for themselves, very often sexuality, as they negotiate that period of adolescence, going into adulthood, which is a period of very, very high change for them, both mentally, emotionally, physically. The change is very, very dramatic at that time. And so the issues related to adolescent are quite different from what we see in children, the smaller children.
I hear you, and thank you so much for elaborating that. And what kind of child mental issues do you address in your practice, in whatever you do?
Okay, so if we look at mental health overall in children, it can be quite challenging. To recognize mental health issues is not so easy. It's not
Yeah.
as straightforward as if we were dealing with an adolescent, because children are different. They are still growing up. They are still negotiating the issues of trust versus mistrust. And so very often when you have mental issues in children, it is very often to misdiagnose it as being mischievous or being naughty or just being restless, that sort of thing. And unfortunately, that can get covered up if they do have a mental issue. That gets covered up by their behaviors, which are more mischief related or withdrawn related, that sort of thing. So it's very easy for parents to misdiagnose it. And when you look listening to adolescents, it's quite different. So these children will find it very difficult to trust. And so if the issue is emanating from home, say some parenting style, or say some cultural or traditional issue that the child is struggling with in this modern era, then what happens is when they are brought for either therapy or to the child psychiatrist, a parent will accompany them. And if the parent is the issue, then the child finds it much more difficult to open up. And so trusting becomes not so instant as it would with an adult or with an adolescent who's brought themselves to therapy. Because don't forget, a child is being brought to therapy. They've not asked for therapy generally. So mental health is quite tricky in that it's very easy to misdiagnose or to put down mental health as if it is a mischief related or a growing up issue, as opposed to that thinking that it could be a serious mental health issue that is sitting there or that is underlying.
Got it. And what are some of the causes of these mental issues in children?
Very often it could be genetic, and that's one. So if it is a much more serious mental issue, say ADHD, we'll talk about that in a bit, or ADD, or any of the other childhood mental health issues, then what happens is that it is difficult to diagnose, but very often it can be genetic, but it can also be triggered off by events in their life. So a very simple example that I usually give parents is that when we are talking about somebody who has a history of, say, diabetes in their family, and then this child is going through a lot of stress, a lot of turmoil, challenges in school, etc., and compounded, say, with obesity, then they become a very good candidate for diabetes. In mental health, it's very similar in that respect. So if there's an underlying predisposition to mental health issues in that family, then it just needs a few triggers for that mental health issue to become more apparent and also now to start manifesting itself. So very often it is genetic, and then you need a trigger for it.
Yeah. And by genetic, it means you acquire it from your parents. Yes, it's in it's in your line.
Yes,
it's in your lineage,
sometimes yes, and very often it won't be just parents. It could be grandparents. So it could skip a generation. It could be gender related.
Okay.
You will find some issues that some mental health issues that seem to lean more towards the gender. And so if there is a boy and a girl, then it doesn't mean both will get it or both will inherit it. And even if they do inherit, it doesn't mean that both will develop that mental health issue. One may and one may not.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And how can a parent be able to know that their child is in need of either a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Usually, parents are the last to recognize that they have a problem with their child. Very often, this will come from others. It will come from teachers. It will come from the caregivers. It will come from relatives and so on. And if this is brought to the parents' notice, most parents first will deny it, or will say this is just mischief related, or they'll try to discipline their child more, not realizing that there could be an underlying mental health condition sitting there. And what then happens is parents generally will go to their first doctor, which is Dr. Google, and they'll Google the problem. And then this becomes a bigger problem, because you see, when they Google, they'll come up with their own diagnosis, their own treatment, or their own cure. This has the potential to do a lot more harm. It makes much more sense to explore this either with their pediatrician when they are visiting, who can then help them to start taking the help they need, and to go into that line of whether they need psychiatrist assistance, or whether they now will work with a psychologist. Then an assessment can be done. But it's a slow process that follows. It's not overnight that you will realize that, oh, this kid has a mental health issue, because a lot of mental health issues will replicate another one. So if it's very easy to misdiagnose one.
What are some of the things or signs that parents should be able to look out for in their children to be able to diagnose them and maybe know that this child needs help?
I wish there was a way whereby we would say that let all children get explored by their teacher or a child psychologist. Parents see behaviors in their child that are different, behaviors that are leading to, say, mischief, behaviors that are leading to different emotions, whether it is anger, whether it is sadness, whether it's tearfulness, whether it's being withdrawn, then these should not be ignored. It's very easy for a parent to say, my child is stubborn, or my child is showing anger because the father or the mother is an angry person. They think that the child is adopting the parent's behavior. Or they'll generally think that anger is genetic. Very often it's never genetic. It's very often the child is reacting to a stimulus in their environment, in their life, in their home, that is leading them to that kind of behavior. And it wants to sort of explore that a little more, sitting and talking to the child. Pillow talk, which is very effective when the parents are putting their child to sleep. That is one of the best times to be able to explore with the child what's going on in their life, how they are coping with issues that are coming up, whether it's schooling, whether it's friendships, whether it's siblings, whether it's within the family or external. That's the best time to sort of explore, but also to listen. Listening is one of the most difficult things for parents to do. Very often they'll try to fix it by either giving advice or disciplining the child.
For instance, if a child is being brought up in an environment where there's domestic violence, or this child is being abused by either the parents or even the siblings just at home, is it one of the causes that might lead to a child being depressed?
Very often, if we look at children, it's not very often that we see depression in children, say, below 10. It's not that it is not there. It's often misdiagnosed as a child being withdrawn or so. But just as I was telling you a little while earlier, that if that child is being brought up in an environment that is abusive or unstable, for lack of a better phrase,
Yeah.
then what will happen is at some point that child will manifest some signs and symptoms of either anxiety or stress or depression.
Yeah.
The sad part is that it's very easy for that to be ignored, because don't forget, they are in an environment that can be abusive to a point where even there is no one-on-one with that child, there is no love and affection with that child, there is no proper parenting with that child, there's very little communication with that child. So what will happen is that child will learn to cope in their own way, whether it's through anger, sadness, withdrawal, cheerfulness, tantrums, that kind of thing. And the parent, because they have got other issues attached to their home, may be one of the last ones to actually address that child's issue. And a lot of times when we deal with children, one of the most important things is the add-on help that we will have to give that family. So there is almost no child therapy that can go on without giving therapy to the parents or the caregivers or the carers. It has to go hand in hand, because not to forget that that child is going back home.
Yeah, with the same people.
That child is going back to that environment. And if the environment is not changing, then it's almost a losing battle. We are not really doing much. We are more or less giving first aid to that child. They go back home, the problem starts again, they come back again. And so nothing changes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for elaborating that. I've also learned something there. So as we wind up this conversation, I wanted you to kindly tell us, what is the youngest case you've ever dealt or?
So one of the youngest I've had is about 6 years old.
Okay.
Between 5 and 6. And these are children that will very often start bedwetting, biting their nails, showing anger, maybe a little bit of sometimes self-harm. You'll find them scratching themselves as a way of trying to relieve the emotion. So we have seen that in as young as 5 and 6. Bedwetting is one of the most common. And of course, parents will, like any other parents, would try either disciplining the child or the usual thing, don't give them something to drink at night, but not realizing that there is an underlying issue that needs to be treated or explored that will actually sort out the problem. So they are more or less treating the symptom, not the actual problem. So the youngest that we see is, and we've seen children of 5 and 6 that are depressed. We have seen children of 5, 6, 7 that have thought about death. We have had a child that has tried to kill himself at the age of 7 by hanging from what they see on the TV, that kind of thing. But it's usually a cry for help. But sometimes, unfortunately, that cry for help either will go unnoticed, or it will get disciplined, or it can lead to a lot of harm. Because you can lose a child before you realize that, yes, there is a problem there.
Thank you so much for sharing all this information. I'm sure we've learned, personally, I've learned a lot of things, and I'm sure even the viewers at home have learned, they've been able to learn one or two things. So I wanted you to kindly share where people can be able to find you, and your social media handles, and just that.
Sure. Thank you. So I work full-time for the Aga Khan University Hospital in Nairobi. It's very, very difficult to get through to me on phone because generally when I'm in a session or so, I can't pick. But an email works best, and that's mahmood.merali@aku.edu. Or you can call the hospital, which is straightforward, 020-366-2000, and they will divert you or put it through to my extension. I can take messages, that sort of thing. We also have a website, that's the aku.edu, and I'm also on LinkedIn. And I regularly check my LinkedIn profile, so if there's messages that are coming in through, I'm very quick to respond.
Thank you so much, Mahmood. And what would be your closing comments to parents, especially now that they're at home with their children?
Sure. The main one is to tell them to listen to their child. They have a beautiful opportunity that when their child is about to go to sleep, or when the child is in the car with them, that is very non-confrontational because there isn't a lot of face-to-face. And so the child generally will feel a lot more safer and lot more comfortable to talk. And so that's a really, really good opportunity to listen to the child and not necessarily try to give too much advice at that time. The idea should be to listen to them. This is the time when there's a beautiful opportunity with the kids at home. That yes, a parent will think these children are a nuisance. We can't wait for them to go back to school. Opportunity to bond, to impart values to the children, to impart traditions to those children, to impart cultural values to those children. So it's a beautiful opportunity, but and hopefully this is when parents can really maximize on that. The idea also is never to ignore. When a child says that they are hurting, they're feeling sad, they're feeling low, they're being bullied or troubled in school, it's a good idea to explore that more and see whether there's more to it than meets the eye.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mahmood. Thank you for your time and wish you all the best in your endeavors. And thank you to everyone who's tuned into the show. My name is Chapchumba Cherus. And yes, I'll see you next time. But for now, it's goodbye.
Thank you so much for watching the Parenting Show. Keep talking to us on our social media for any questions, the guests that you would like us to bring your way. I have been your host, Juliet, hoping to see you next time. For now, goodbye.